Okay, thank you everyone for coming to my panel titled The Death of Copyright. What we're going to talk about in this panel is a couple of concepts. The first is the concept of a world where copyright might not exist. And the reason why we're going to look at this particular concept is that there are a lot of conditions that exist today that did not exist in the past, which make much of copyright law and much of copyright's concepts either out of date or ill-suited for today's world. And we're going to talk about how we can build business models around copyright not being used to enforce many of the things we currently rely on it for today, as well as why it's not well suited for today's world. In this presentation, we're going to pretend as if copyright entirely disappears, even though in reality it still exists in a very basic form, and it's still used by very large corporations and occasionally successfully by smaller individuals. And we're going to talk a little bit about why it's difficult to use copyright to your advantage as a small creator and what that means for you. So this is not, I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, this is more of an exploration of an idea, of a set of ideas and concepts. So if you have any questions about how copyright actually works or how it can pertain to you in your specific legal context, please consult a lawyer. This is just a general overview of some things, and if I say anything that's legally incorrect, that's because I don't entirely understand what I'm talking about, and this again is not advice. So, what is copyright? Copyright is the set of laws that we use to enforce the intellectual property ownership of a concept or a work of art. The purpose of creating copyright is to ensure that artists are able to get paid for their work, and we want to also prevent people from modifying the material and changing it from what we actually meant it to say. This is the intent, but I want to talk about how this may not work exactly as we expect. Come on. All right, there. So the thing about copyright is that you don't make money from your copyright directly. You have the ability to make money if you use your copyright in a legal action, or if your copyright has enough teeth to it to prevent someone from undercutting your creative market, something you're trying to build. So for instance, if you have copyright, you have the assurance that you're the only one that can print a particular book. Then if someone else starts trying to print your book, you are able to take that person to court regardless of whether or not they have entered into a previous contract with you. The general law that you can't use someone else's work works to your advantage here. You're able to collect on the money that they make, or otherwise prevent them from creating the material. So copyright itself does not create money as much as it assures your ability to collect on other people's earnings if they try to use your work without permission, or it prevents someone else from particularly making any money and allows you to be the monopolistic provider of that particular piece of art. So to really make money from copyright, you need to create an original, tangible, artistic work with no outside help, or else licenses from other creators to incorporate the work into your own. The only exception might be for public domain things. So I want to get a real sense of what I mean by original work. Due to the way that copyright is, everything down to the atomic level can potentially be copyrighted. If you've ever used a font that you downloaded from the internet in your piece of work, some work that you're making, and you didn't get a specific license for it that allows you to use it commercially, you could potentially be liable for that piece of work, even though you were able to just grab it from the internet and download it and use it. And people normally don't think of fonts as something that's an artistic work that's copyrighted, but it is, and you could be liable for that situation. If the brushes you downloaded from somewhere weren't brought with the correct license, you might end up legally liable for that copyright. If you used a stock photo from the internet that you didn't pay for a specific license to use, you might be legally liable. And if any of these pieces were gathered from someone who didn't do the correct licensing, you might also be legally liable for using that. So you have to be aware of, from the top to the bottom, of every possible license that you might work with, even ones you would assume are already there, and you might be liable to copyright. That doesn't necessarily mean anyone's actually going to sue you for it, but you have to realize that copyright starts with the assumption that someone creates from absolute zero and works their way up, or else gets permission from everyone else who has already made money off of their work. Then you have to register your copyright. And yes, you do have to... Is hiding a bit of the presentation? Yes. Oh, yes. Okay, hold on. Let me move the camera then slightly so you can see the bottom. Thank you for letting me know. Boop. Okay, so you do have to register your copyright. Notionally, the law says that you copyright something the moment you create it. The moment you create it, something is copyrighted to you. But the reality is that your ability to sue someone in federal court over it is greatly hindered to the point of almost being impossible if you don't have some registration with the Library of Congress and copyright, the copyright offices. So you will end up paying many times, sometimes more than you would have gotten paid for a commission that you created. You might have to pay more to copyright that piece and be able to sue for it than you would have, received in compensation for creating it in the first place. Then you need to find someone who has violated your copyright, and then you need to sue them. Or else you need to make sure that you get the exact market they would have had if you prevent them. So to put that another way, say there's someone who wants to use your particular piece of work and sell it to a group of people. If they know a group of people or know how to market to a group of people that would purchase a copy of your work, you only make money by preventing them from doing so if you can assure that you're able to reach that same audience and sell to that same audience. So for instance, if you have a book that is being printed and run in the United States, and you don't really have a way to print and run that in Canada, but Canada and the United States have an agreement for copyright with each other, then anyone who is going to make a copy of your book in Canada and make some money off of it isn't able to make money off of it, but neither are you, and so neither of you benefits. But you also have the ability to seek damages from someone who would go and make a copy unauthorized of your piece. So you need to find someone who would violate your copyright, and you need to take them to court. Then whatever you finish with after you win your court battle and paying your lawyer is yours to keep. That might not be a whole lot, especially if you can't prove that the degree of damage that someone caused by selling your work unauthorized is very high. Even if someone goes and posts your work to social media in a way that you don't approve of, if you were to try to sue them for it, you're probably going to have a lot of limit to what you could actually collect if you took them to court, because it's hard to prove any particular damage when they're not selling it. There is still some statutory damages that may come into play where you can have a particular violation that you can press for, but you don't get any of that money. The state does. Or you can do this. You can sell your copyright to a publisher who has enough money to do all of these things from the above. And you're going to find there is a pattern here in the legal framework where the legal framework greatly favors large established studios over small individual creators, and the entire system, in fact, is not created for you. Copyright's protections are outside the means of most artists. The ability to go and retain a lawyer to begin with, to even ask a lawyer, may end up costing you more than you got for whatever commission you did, for instance. If you can't prove that you have enough backing to actually carry out the suit, then you're in trouble, because if someone can call your bluff, they could just keep on making the material over and over again. They can keep on republishing your book. They can keep on reprinting your piece. If they know that you really don't have the means to sue them because you can't even get someone to represent you, then you basically don't have copyright protections at all. Many times you can still have the threat of suing someone if you write something to someone and say, look, if you don't take this down, or you don't uh, offer to pay me, I'm going to take you to court. If they don't know any better and think that you can afford to do it, then they may capitulate. Or if they're worried about their reputation, they may capitulate. But some people who know that either they're unlikely to get any real attack from you because you're probably not going to be able to afford a lawyer, or they know that their lawyers are good enough to make it too expensive for you to go after them, those people can keep going. And frequently, very large artists have been known to do crazy stuff on Twitter where they go and use someone else's work, and basically the only recourse those people have is that there are a lot of people tweeting about how terrible it is that they use their work, which is a really limited way to get back at someone. The other part is that copyright law is not universal. If something's copyrighted in the United States, that does not necessarily mean that you can enforce that copyright in China. If you have a t-shirt design that you have made and you're selling on your website, if someone in China takes that t-shirt design and puts it on a shirt, they can sell it to people in China for no contribution to you, and they may be able to get it sold in the United States even if you have the copyright here, because it would be difficult to go after them in the right way. They can create a shell company somewhere in the United States who's easy enough to sue or take down, but then just spin up another company over there. I think you'll remember a while back there was a website where people would say, I would like a shirt of this on Twitter, and then that site would scrape tweets that had that information and then automatically create a listing on their site where you could purchase a shirt of that image. And that made a lot of people very mad, but it would have been very difficult to go after them because of the nature of how indirected they were from the intellectual property rights over in like third world countries printing off these shirts. At least I figured that's probably where they were. They might have been in the United States, but I have a feeling if you were going to be that brazen about it, you probably had most of your manufacturing outside of the United States. Of course, that one had a very satisfying conclusion. I'm sure many of you remember everyone posting ridiculous pieces of imagery that said, I'm a copyright violator, and had pictures of Mickey Mouse, and then everyone would comment on that, I would like a shirt of this, so it would end up on their site and attract a ton of attention that they didn't want. And I think that eventually took them down. It just took a lot of work. And it wasn't via legal action as much as it was via the fear of legal action, I think, more than anything. But I didn't follow up on that, to be sure. So maybe they did actually get something out of that. So, broken expectations. Copyright brings with it a number of really broken expectations. We have things like the one-hit wonder bands. And you look at a particular single piece of art and we say, okay, this piece of art is going to launch me into a position where I am paid forever and set for life. And I think that ends up a really bad expectation. Most artists do not make their fortune off of one single piece of art. They make it off of a very continual process of making more and more content for people to consume, and better reaching their audience and growing their audience into a very large support base that wants to keep on buying and supporting them in the work that they do. So this idea that you are a single artist in isolation who works on something in their basement, and then they post it online, and then that's the thing that launches you into stardom because copyright ensures no one else can print it, that ends up really a broken idea. I think that's kind of the message that it advertises, that someone creates something and then they should benefit from it essentially in perpetuity. When copyright was first conceived in the United States, it had a limit of a handful of years, whereas today it's like the death of the person who made it plus 75 because of Disney's continual lobbying, which means that you can create something once and theoretically benefit off of it forever if you can keep enforcing that copyright. Again, since you're a small artist, you probably can't do that, but the large corporations definitely can. And they definitely got on board, early on before it was that way. So a lot of them are able to use that inertia they have. Another problem is censorship. So I'm sure you've seen plenty of YouTube creators complaining that their stuff has gotten taken down because they used a clip from a video that another creator made, some large corporation has the right to it, they take them down, they get a copyright strike against their YouTube channel, and they can't even discuss the problem they have with that content, even though it would normally be considered fair use. And why is it that fair use isn't very protective? Well, the thing is, fair use is fairly useless. In most cases where you have fair use, in fact, fair use is not a get out of court free card. There's no law that says, oh, this thing is fair use. What it is it's a recognition where you say, yes, I violated your copyright, but it's okay because X. And that's an argument you have to make in court. Again, it's way too expensive to defend your fair use. It's basically a total gamble. And so just the ability to talk about a piece that someone else has made in a critical manner could be more expensive than it's worth to do, and that prevents us from really having good voices critically examine pieces of material or works of art that could help us better understand it or criticize it or understand its limitations. You know, the funny thing is, I would like to ask everyone to turn off their phones, but I'm the one who screwed that one up. Just one moment. Let me get that turned off. There we go. All right. So, thanks for your patience there. Another thing I've seen in the fandom is character sales and default rights assignments are broken. You have things like closed species or character sales, and the assumption that copyright really covers these cases in the way that people think it does is totally broken. What you might not realize is that if you had an idea for a character, but someone else drew that character for you, the artist that drew that character actually owns the copyright to your character. If you didn't realize that, you're like 99% of furries. Okay, so the first artist that you had commission your character for is the one who owns it. So the first thing you need to do if you're coming up with a character is draw your own version, however terrible it is, and post it somewhere and maybe copyright it, or else you really don't own that character from a legal standpoint, which is mind-blowing, right? And the idea that someone can sell a character, well, there are very specific legal requirements you have for some character to be considered copyrightable to begin with. I'm not going to go into all the details here. If you've ever followed Boozy Badger on Twitter, he has a blog article where he goes over the limitations of copyright for character ownership and what specific things need to be in play for you to be able to say that character is copyrighted, or that because some of the times it's not that the character is copyrighted, it's that the character is only copyrighted in a specific context, and it gets really muddled there. So copyright was not really designed to handle your persona, just straight up wasn't. And default rights assignment. So what you might not realize is that, and I think this is a fairly recent change, it was different a few years ago, where if someone creates a piece of art, they retain the copyright to it even if they are paid for creating that piece of art. So when you commission an artist, you might not realize that you can't actually go print that on a shirt without their permission. Now, we might, if someone's an artist really been following art for a long time, they might understand that because they spent at least a little bit of time looking at copyright to figure that out. But for someone who's just gone and commissioned for the first time and they got a piece they really liked and got it on a shirt, to think that they are actually violating the law or might be legally liable for thousands of dollars or something is absurd. And it's a really big customer service issue if you were to ever actually come after them for that. So it becomes a question of, if I paid for this work to be made, why are not the rights assigned to me? Or how do we figure that out? And basically you have to have a contract, or else everyone's going to be surprised in some way. The defaults are never what you expect them to be. And again, going back to that first part about starting from zero, it gives this really terrible expectation that an artist is not a real artist if they don't create from absolute zero, if they don't create from scratch. But let's be honest, most artists do some sort of work where they are either referencing another piece of art, or they are practicing someone else's style, or they are doing whatever else. And the idea that you have to hit this minimum amount of creative capability before you are allowed to ask anyone for money for what you're doing is really broken. It is probably, I would consider it, in fact, unhealthy, because the reality is that we all create art in different ways, and there are entire genres of art that are based on like remixes or whatever else. So asserting that the only valid type of art is that which is completely licensed all over or which is created from zero doesn't match how we create art today, especially in the world of memes. So if you had like uh, that Twitter meme a while back where it was like draw 6 characters or whatever, and everyone draws a character, theoretically all of those might have been violating copyright, either by the person who created the meme or by the individual characters that they're drawing after. It's very testy. Like, it's, you don't actually know until someone takes you to court whether you violated anything. Usually, I would think most of the cases that would fall under fair use. But again, as we talked about earlier, fair use is a defense in court. It's not a get out of suit free card. And now we need to look at some of the other realities that you can't argue with that exist in the modern world. The first is that reproducing an artistic work costs nothing with modern technology. Anyone can copy a file. The only cost you have is a few bytes on your hard drive, or the small amount of time it took you to transmit it over the network. That's nothing. And that means that people don't have the same intuitive sense of theft with that, because not only does it take next to nothing to do, but the person who had the original copy of the art doesn't lose the original copy of the art. If someone breaks into your house and takes your computer, that's definitely theft. You don't have access to the computer anymore. This was the computer you had exclusive access to. But you basically have to be told that you're not allowed to copy something, and there has to be someone going out and finding people who are making copies to try to stop them with modern technology. And so it ends up very backwards, where people think they can just share everything and then are really surprised and often get mad when they're told they're not allowed to share it or copy it or whatever else. And you can fight this and say, look, you need to pay the artist, and I agree, everyone needs to pay their artists, but this may not be the best avenue to go across now. You definitely don't want to be in a position of going and attacking your fans, even if your fans are doing something that clearly undermines your method of getting paid at this moment. And so we need to look at other methods of getting money from fans that doesn't require us to use the legal system to threaten anyone who shares copies of our work. In fact, it might be better if we find business methods that allow for the art itself to be distributed relatively freely, but find other ways of bringing payment into that process. If you have not heard of IPFS, IPFS is the Interplanetary File System. It is a technology that came out a few years ago, where anyone can browse this infinitely large hard drive, and basically all it does is any file you visit on IPFS is sort of BitTorrented to your local machine, and anyone who visits your that file will get pieces of it from anyone who's visited it previously, which makes it to where you can effectively permanently put a piece of art on the web and it never goes away. I mean, that's already been true. Anything on the internet is forever, but this has made it so much forever that it's impossible to stop. And blockchain has also done the same thing. I know some people have managed to use blockchain to sort of sell digital assets or comics or whatever else, but at the same time, it can also be used to bake a piece of data into a publicly available ledger that anyone can access and no one can remove. So that means that copyrighted works can easily be embedded into blockchain blocks, and everyone would have a copy of it that spins up a node for that blockchain without you being able to stop them. And again, the way memes and social media have worked have changed expectations altogether. The most recent meme I'm thinking of is the Sailor Moon screenshot meme, where she's kind of looking up with a sort of bemused look at the viewer. That everyone makes their own riff of that. In theory, that can be a copyright violation that everyone's doing, but the reality is that's a great benefit to the community at large. It's a drawing activity. It brings everyone together. Everyone gets to take their take on it. There's some really beautiful art that comes out of it. That's really changing the expectations. People are expecting a lot more art to be remixed or riffed on, and there is a large market and creative opportunity in doing this sort of mimetic shifting of every piece of art that comes out. You can just riff and remix on top. So let's talk about what can we do? What can we do to succeed in the modern world? The first thing we want to do is, as mentioned earlier, you really don't want to spend time attacking pirates. There's a couple of reasons why. The first is that many of the pirates that are pirating your work are actually fans of your work that may eventually start paying if they're in the right position. For instance, you can sometimes have people who are either young or poor that don't have a way to spend money, but they want to consume your content, and you wouldn't be able to get money out of them anyway. And then there are other people who are insistent on never paying for anything, and they're not the people you're going to convince to pay you anyway, and the only benefit you might get to copyright is to try to hit them with a legal stick. So the people that really... The real benefit in the piracy, as terrible as it may be, is that it brings out a larger audience to begin with, and you'll find more people who are more likely to want to pay you just from the fact that it gets distributed outward. Someone sees this piece of art they got for free, even though normally you charge for it, and they say, hey, who is that person? And then they go visit your website, they go visit your gallery, and they go about paying you. Because I think the main thing we need to do is just focus on creating norms for paying artists for their work. So right now we have things like Patreon, which is great because you can quickly subscribe and find a way to keep on paying an artist and helping support them from month to month. But at the same time, we have to know that anyone who's taking a Patreon reward, if it's not a very special kind of reward, that reward can be disseminated on pirate sites. And we can definitely look at these pirate sites and create a norm of, hey, don't do this, pay the artists. But we definitely don't want to try to spend time and effort on using the legal systems to try to stop them. So we can definitely set norms for not pirating, and if you're pirating, eventually paying for work. But we don't want to spend a whole lot of time getting mad at everyone who pirates, because there are a myriad set of reasons why they do so. And we're better off just trying to say, hey, if you really like this, there's a way you can support the artist who makes it. Please join me on this. And always giving someone the opportunity to be good and look like a good person, even if they started off from a bad position, is ultimately helpful. And it gets more people coming at you. Another thing we can do is we can bundle cost services with costless services. So most people get the art from a commission for free, except for the person who pays you to do the piece. The person who pays you to do the piece is the one who gets to decide exactly what you draw, but everyone else gets a copy of the art for free. And so in that way, you're able to give a costless service to everyone, this copy of art. This, like, they don't pay for the art itself, but you still are able to bundle that with something that does pay you, which is the commission for the specific buyer. Another thing you can do is private shows of some sort, like you have, if you're doing a presentation or you're just doing like an online chat, you can limit who can connect to the video stream as you talk to your higher tier donors or whatever else. You can create experiences, you can sell autographed copies of your book, and people often want that authentic piece of work. So for instance, the Crypto Comics people that I got to talk with the other day, they have blockchain copies of comics and access to comics. And even though you might potentially be able to get copies of those comics for free if someone disseminated them, you could never say you were the one who put your money on the line to support this artist and have the official copy of this piece. And so sometimes the fact that something is an official copy is valuable enough in itself, and people will buy and sell that particular right to access, even if it might be possible to get the source material individually, because people do want to be part of supporting the artists that they follow. They do want to have something that's authentic. Authenticity is really important in today's world, where a lot of things can be fake or surface level. So the ability to say, yes, I am someone who verifiably paid for and helped an artist and supported them, makes people feel really good. And I would also suggest viewing your works and characters as mythologies to build on top of, rather than a canon to be enforced. So sometimes I see people getting especially frustrated when they see one of their pieces of art, like their commissions, being used by someone who's going on role playing. And I get that, because you have in your mind, this character behaves this way, and this person who's role playing has no idea how this character behaves, or doesn't care, and is now using them to like do all sorts of dirty things, or get eaten by a dragon or something. And it's like, oh God, why would they do this? Why would they do this? And I get that revulsion, because, you know, if I created a character, if I spent a lot of time on this character making them a certain way, it seems ridiculous that someone would just go and take it and use it that way. But there's a lot of potential in creating characters and mythologies from those characters, and permitting a base of fan works. So, for instance, Harry Potter is a huge, like, multinational conglomerate now. And it started with one woman who was writing a bunch of novels, and then everybody writing slash fiction about those characters on fanfiction.net. And if those characters had not spent, if those people had not spent writing all that really raunchy fiction, I don't think that it would have exploded in quite the same way. I think that allowing your work to be used as the base of someone else's creative work allows you to have more of an impact artistically with the entire world, and also encourages people to try to support you, because their work now is dependent on your work. And it creates a much more rich universe of creativity from which to work from. In fact, one thing, since this is at CouchCon and I saw Dreamkeepers for the first time a few weeks ago, I started to read the Dreamkeepers comic. I remember at the very beginning of the book, it talking about how everyone has a power. And I thought to myself immediately, oh, this is genius, because this is actively inviting the creation of original characters in this universe. And there is nothing that can get people more invested in your creative work than to be able to create with you as a fan. And so I would definitely encourage, just let people use your stuff to create other things, even if it's not something you would directly support. After all, if someone does come up with something you really support, you can always canonize it and work with them to make money together. And this brings us to a couple of places where, you know, maybe not having copyright puts us in a bad position, where we would like to be able to see something done about, say, big name artists using small time artists' work, or someone who is directly copying instead of remixing on top of what you're making. And I don't know if that there is a 100% way to solve either of those things. If I were creating something and there was a very large name artist who cribbed something from me and used it like as an album cover or something, I could either spend time, you know, threatening them and potentially have all of their fans start coming at me and attacking me and accusing me of all sorts of things because I wasn't supporting their idol, or I could try to figure out a way to capitalize off of it by saying, oh man, I'm super excited that so-and-so used my piece as the album art on their work. And you frame it in such a way where You're excited that they worked with you, but also make it very apparent that you were the one who did this thing. And their lawyers in the background are more likely to say, hey, you should probably pay that guy because he has the ability to tank you, and now everyone's seeing what he's saying. But also, you have the ability for that artist to possibly promote you as well because you are looking excited about what they're doing. And artists typically like to amplify voices that amplify themselves, just like any other human being. So that's something to consider. For direct copying instead of remixing, that can help someone in a short-term space. Like if they are looking like they're creating this or that, they can take your work and they can post it as their own for a while, but eventually that catches up to people. Your fans will notice, and your fans will yell at them, and you don't even necessarily have to do anything about it directly. It usually gets solved, or you can talk with an administrator and say, hey, this person is just directly copying. You can handle that, but you probably don't need to go through the trouble of going through the legal system to deal with it, because people generally recognize when someone isn't remixing, when someone isn't building off of someone else's work, but just direct copying it, because it's obvious, you know? And people don't really want to support someone who's just copying. They want to support someone who's doing more original work or who's doing remixing work. And given enough time and enough visibility and conversation, you can cover most of the cases that would be handled there. But again, there is no system that can stop every predator from behaving poorly. That's just reality. So what we want to focus on is what methods can we use to reduce the damage or mishandling of artistic works, and how do we go about that? So yeah, so that's all I have for you in terms of pre-written stuff. So open for questions, and also this presentation was created by arteconomy.com, which is, you know, the site that I work. It's the site, it's my site. I had a lot of fun making it, and it's a way to handle your commissions online and easily find someone to commission. And if you're an artist, it keeps all of your work organized for you and helps you make sure you never forget who you owe art, and you have all of your references in one place and all of the information in one place, and it handles payments safely. You pay us, we hold on to the money, and we release it when the piece is done, so the artist knows they're going to get paid, and the commissioner knows that they're not going to get stiffed. And thank you. So any questions you guys have? I'm looking at the chat on Picarto and on voice channel text chat. Okay, question. How do you feel about artists putting their name on their art versus keeping the name off? You know, I think it's really cool when an artist finds a way to make their signature into the art itself, such that the art doesn't feel complete without it there. I've seen some really cool framing work where someone draws borders around it and they had something like in the corner, and that looks really nice. Or you could have if there's a piece where there's like a tree, you could have the roots written into a name. What I would say is that whenever you're going to sign a piece of work, you should sign it in a way that complements the art and doesn't violate it. Ultimately, if someone wants to be an asshole, they can cut your signature off of the art, but most people don't want to bother going through the trouble, and they at very least are okay with sharing the art itself. And when they do so, the signature's there. And I would definitely say, if you see a piece of art where someone has cut off the signature and they're not finding any way to credit the artist, talk to that person. You know, say, hey, look, someone worked really hard on this, and I think you should consider showing who did it and giving them some credit, because it's really amazing, and I'd like to see them get more patrons. So definitely we need to cultivate a world where preserving the signature is the norm, and part of the way we can do this is by making the signature itself artful and respectful of the piece that it's put onto. Let's see, any more questions? Voice channel. I lost track of the channel I was looking at. Where did it go? Voice channel. Oh, there it is. Voice channel text chat. Thank you. Thank you. All right, then I'll give a few more minutes here for questions. Oh wait, does arteconomy.com support your opinions on copyright or the death on it? I mean, I am arteconomy.com essentially. Me and my wife run it, so yes. We definitely try to give the best defaults we can. I mean, the reason why we do commission work specifically and why we haven't spent a whole lot of time on things like downloadable bundles or whatever is that we generally find those things like general downloadable bundles less exciting, because we find commission work or ways to directly have your patrons involved in the creation experience more exciting to us, because we think that generates more community and that's something we're more interested in. And okay, rephrasing the question. I was wondering what would be the best way to ensure that my work is mine. Okay. The best way to ensure that your work is mine. Do you mean the best way to ensure that people know that you made it? Okay. The best way to ensure that people know that you made it is to sign it, or to make sure that it's published on your particular gallery and that you have links to it. When people, if you've made something that people really like, they can sometimes Google around for this thing, and so you want to make sure that whatever you're posting has the right keywords that people are likely to use to search for it. You want to make sure that you are publishing it in a manner that's easy to search for, like some sites that are better SEO optimized. Or you want to make sure again that you have some way into the file itself that you're distributing that says you own it. Now, if you're doing like audio, one of the cool things you can do is you can use ID3 tags to like work on the meta information that's on the piece itself without it actually being played out the speakers. Like if every song were ending with "made by Kanye," then I think we'd be a little bit bothered by that. But to have it in the MP3 file where it says this is the artist is Kanye West or whatever, that's really helpful. And I believe there are ways to annotate images with similar information, but they're not universally accepted, and so signatures are the best ways to do that. For any other compiled piece where it might be a movie or whatever, you can have a credit section where it rolls by and says who makes it. You can even have credits in the front. So basically, you just need to find a way to incorporate your signature without it being without it clashing with the piece itself. So like we talked about earlier. And again, there's not a way to prevent someone who's really determined to do it from removing your signature from a piece of art. I mean, there's even now AI programs that can try to find signatures and remove them. You're not going to be able to stop the asshole who does that. But you can provide the piece as in as many venues as you can with the signature on it, so people can more likely find who created the work. The person you're most worried about is the person who sees a piece of your art once, likes it, and can't find you. So that's it. As you create more and more content, just please consistently sign, please consistently mark on it, because who knows, they may find it again, even if someone was an asshole and removed your signature. Yes, there is that too. So if an artist becomes large enough and people know their style, if someone were to take something, a copy of their work and try to pass it off as their own or not credit the artist, people who knew the style, even if they hadn't seen that specific piece, might say, "Hey, isn't that Golden Druid's work?" and be able to go after them. On a book, you definitely should put it on the cover. Books are one of those places where copyright is more solid, I think, than other places. So that's definitely a good place to use it. You could still use your legal avenues if someone were to make a copy of that, but I would definitely say incorporate the signature in the text, or like for a book. I mean, you have the title page, right? You have the front page, the cover, and there's also usually on the first few pages of the book, there's like an author section and then a dedication section where you thank your wife and children, without which the book would have been finished much sooner, that sort of thing. So you write it there, and usually people preserve that. Yes, watermarks are also a method. Again, as we talked about before, you can't stop everyone, but watermarks can help a lot with things like animation, so people can see it. I would definitely keep it kind of like on the lower right hand corner and make it to where it doesn't interfere with most of the animation itself, but it also would damage an understanding of the piece if you were to crop it further, so it's less likely to cause that problem. But really, it's up to you how you do that. See if I missed anything. All right, give a couple more minutes here, and if we're good to go, then I'll see you guys back on the chat. Any more questions? Do I have any more resources for artists? Actually, if you check out the Artconomy blog, you go to artconomy.com, and in the sidebar, there's a link to the blog, or you could just do artconomy.com/blog, I think, and it will bring up here. I've got a bunch of articles covering everything from how to price yourself to how to build an audience. So I think those are really nice resources. I spent a lot of time writing those articles. I hope you like them. I hope they're helpful to you. If they are, please let me know. I always feel good when someone's given me a virtual pat on the head by telling me they like something. I think we all do. Would it be possible to read and watch this presentation again at a later date? Actually, I am recording it right now, and assuming that my recording software didn't screw up, you should be able to watch it again. Awesome. I'm glad it will be helpful to you. All right. Any other questions? You're welcome. All right, then thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming today, and I will see you back in the CouchCon chat. Have a good one.